Hello and welcome to the 8th video in my 10-part series on how organizations unwittingly burn out their employees. I'm Dr. Geri Puleo, the President and CEO of Change Management Solutions, and today we're going to be discussing how unethical or even illegal requests burn out employees. So when I began my research on the causes and maintenance factors of employee burnout during transformational organizational change, one of the most shocking revelations that I discovered was that 57% of the participants in my study, well over half, regardless of whether they were a change leader or the target of an organizational change, burned out because their superiors asked them to take actions that were deemed to be either unethical or outright illegal. Now think about that. If over half of employees are routinely asked to take actions that are unethical or illegal, what kind of a culture does that create? And how would you feel if your superiors were asking you to do these types of actions? The other thing I found very interesting is that nonprofit organizations were much more prevalent in terms of the requests for unethical or illegal behaviors by their employees. About 2/3 of my participants who worked for nonprofits and burned out during the organizational change were asked to take unethical actions. And that was much higher than the 50% of the for-profit organizations. Now, how did individuals react to these requests by gender? Well, women seem to experience the disconnect and the frustration, anger, apathy, and eventual burnout more than men did. In fact, about 60% of women experienced more stress from these requests as opposed to only 50% of men. So what exactly is this connection between burnout and unethical or illegal requests? This graphic is part of my Burnout During Organizational Change, or BDOC model, which I discussed in more detail in the first video in this series. But for a quick recap, most employees are hopeful in their jobs and want to do good work. However, based on various organizational factors, including unethical or illegal requests, they eventually become frustrated, angry, apathetic, and then eventually burned out. But what specifically are these organizational triggers that are interpreted by employees as asking them to do something unethical or illegal? Well, the first is unprofessional conduct and behavior. While sexual harassment is definitely illegal, many of the participants in my studies burned out because they deemed the actions of their superiors to be unethical and unprofessional. Now, this would include things such as constantly yelling or screaming at them or even swearing at them. Now, it's not illegal to swear at work, and it's really not illegal to scream at employees. But I think we'd all agree that that type of an environment can create chaos, and it can be very tumultuous for employees. And when it gets too bad, they will burn out because they don't feel that they're validated. Another organizational factor is when there is outright evidence of fraud or coercion to get employees to do things that are unethical or illegal. For example, I had one participant who had signed off on each page of important financial documents that were getting ready to be filed, and then she discovered that some of the important, crucial records had been deleted from the package. This to her was not only unethical, but this was blatantly illegal, and she was terrified that she could face legal jeopardy because of the actions of her bosses in this fraudulent, coercive event. Now, when you have an environment that's characterized by unprofessional conduct, fraud, or coercion, This leads to a culture of gamesmanship rather than teamwork. And when you have gamesmanship, whereas I win and you lose, there's no trust in the organization, and people are constantly looking over their shoulders and seeing how they can one up their colleagues or even their superiors. And this creates in employees a symptom of cognitive dissonance. Now, what is cognitive dissonance? Basically, it's when you are taking actions that are not aligned with your values or beliefs. Now, some people will do this just because they need the job, and therefore they're going to take these actions, and they say, well, I have to do this in order to get ahead. But the problem is the human body and the human psyche are not created that way. And when your actions don't reflect your values, it creates extreme feelings of distress and unease, and even can lead to disease. Now, this loops back to a win-lose mentality in employees. And that's only because they have to adopt this mentality, whether or not they really believe in it, simply because they want to survive within the organization. And the result here is that the cognitive dissonance in star employees and ethical leaders will lead them to leave the company. And when that happens with high turnover, you have an organization that is characterized by a culture of distrust and even a culture in which unethical or illegal behaviors are sanctioned. Now we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about ethics, the law, and burnout. To create an ethical culture, you need to create a culture that is driven by its values, because values drive the attitudes and the consequent behaviors of employees throughout the organization. Now, this is critical to have a values-driven culture. It goes way beyond having a mere code of ethics. Many companies now have a code of ethics as a way to mitigate potential legal ramifications based on the actions of their employees. But unifying principles go beyond a code of ethics. Unifying principles answer the questions of who are we? What do we stand for as a company? What do we commit to doing? And what do we absolutely refuse to do in the name of getting ahead or succeeding in business? Those principles are values driven. And when you're interviewing job candidates for potential openings within your company, you need to include ethical quandaries in job interviews. These are not simple questions such as, would you ever do anything illegal in order to get ahead? Well, everybody's going to answer, absolutely not. I wouldn't do anything like that. But by framing the question in a behavioral format, such as, tell me about a time when you were asked to do something that would hurt one of your clients, but would benefit your employer. That is what I mean by a quandary, and it tells a lot about the values driving that job candidate and is a great predictor of how they will actually do their jobs within your organization. And when it comes to performance reviews, once the employees are hired, you need to go beyond what is accomplished by recognizing how it was accomplished. In other words, just because an employee has a great result, you need to look at how they achieved that result. Did they undermine their colleagues? Did they increase sales, but there was a great deal of returns because the customers felt pressured? All of these types of things are critical, and the how somebody accomplishes their task duties and responsibilities is indicative of their values. And you want to make sure that employee values are aligned with the values found in your unifying principles. So the key takeaway here is that employer of choice brands, which are those companies that have such a great culture that candidates and professionals are actively seeking to work for them. Employer of choice brands are created and maintained by a culture that is driven by honesty and ethics. And if you think that your company can get away with stuff, all you need to do are to read the reviews on and comments on glassdoor.com regarding your company, as well as listen to the professional grapevine within your industry. Values-driven cultures create employer of choice brands. But let's be honest, just attempting to create a culture of trust goes way beyond what will actually happen. It creates the foundation, but you still have to monitor whether employees are actually complying with those unifying principles and subsequently if they are complying with legal regulations. And this is where checks and balances come in. Checks and balances rule. You need to also remember that what gets measured by your organization or what is acknowledged, recognized, and rewarded is what employees are going to focus on. In other words, what gets measured gets done. And the checks and balances are a way to ensure that how things are being done are aligned with your unifying principles, your code of ethics, and your values. One way to ensure this type of compliance is to incorporate mandatory standards for critical decision making. And these standards are not just monetary or financial, but they should also include the values that are used in order to arrive at these decisions. But the only way to really monitor legal compliance is through open communication across all channels of command within the organization. The only way the communication will be open within your organization is if you have created an environment of trust. And an environment or culture of trust requires absolute honesty and ethical behavior. But things can happen. And if there are any acts of impropriety that come to your attention, you need to investigate them immediately and then take action properly and promptly. There shouldn't be excuses for these types of behaviors, and there never, ever, ever exert any ramifications against the whistleblower who brought these acts of impropriety to your attention. Most importantly, the key takeaway here when it comes to monitoring legal compliance is that ignorance, or I didn't know, is not a defense in the courtroom. So perhaps Jean de La Fontaine said it best. A person, or in this case a company, often meets his destiny on the road he took to avoid it. In other words, it's karma. If you treat employees or customers or society or your community at large improperly or badly, karma's going to come back. You're never going to be an employer of choice brand, and you may face serious financial and legal ramifications. Oh, and just for the record, technology is great, but technology can much more quickly illuminate illegal activities.